Holly, welcome back to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good, Luke. It's good to be back here. How are
Absolutely.
you?
You belong here. I mean, at
I
this point in
do.
time, you've been on the show a number of times. I've been on your wonderful podcast a bunch of times as well. And I think it is fifth. I know we were trying to figure out fifth or sixth times. It's around there.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right.
Ish.
You probably do math better than I do.
I don't know. I think I'm remembering it because like five's my favorite number. So it's just like
Oh,
it's got to be
okay.
five.
Yeah,
To try to
yeah.
think about it like that. But thank you so much though for coming back onto the show another time around. And today I'd love to kind of just like dive in more into your story of things and of course be able to talk more about your career pathway, a day in the life of an instructional designer at Amazon, and of course to hear about all the awesome things that you've been up to over the last couple of months since I've last talked to you. I was going to say it's been a while besides just on LinkedIn messages
Yeah.
here and there, right? But
Yes.
for those who may not know who you are and they haven't listened to your fabulous podcast episodes before, can you introduce yourself and tell us more about who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi everyone. I'm happy to be back on Luke's podcast. My name is Holly Owens, and I am currently an instructional designer at Amazon Pharmacy. So I've been doing that coming up on 2 years this summer, which has flown by. And I've done a lot of different roles throughout my career, and I've mostly spent time in higher education. I was a teacher. We'll get into all that. Host a podcast, do some other side hustle type things, but that's mostly what I do. I'm like Luke, Jane Jack of all trades and, dabble in this and that, but truly instructional design is my passion. And I also teach as well. So Luke and I are like instructional design twins. I think I've said that before. We like kind of do the same stuff, just at different places.
I was just going to say, this sounds very similar to the story that I know as well. What is, and I didn't prepare you for this, but I'm going to ask anyway. What is your best tip for time management with juggling all of your projects?
I use Pomodoro. Technique. I haven't found anything else that works quite like that. Pomodoro and listening to music work for me. You have your YouTubes, which I've used before in those working sessions. I feel like I have undiagnosed ADHD as an adult. Like it should have been diagnosed a long time ago because my mind is just like, I want to do this and I want to do that, but I have to finish something first. I have to tell myself to finish something. So that Pomodoro, I'm like, oh wow, 25 minutes went by and I got all of that done. Like I got that whole task done. I focused on one thing. That is the one thing that works for me, and I highly, highly recommend it. And you can go on the tomato timer or, do 25 minutes, whatever. Go to listen to Luke's working sessions, and it really does work, especially if you have trouble concentrating.
Yeah, if you want to see some super old videos of me with like that gigantic beard, then you can pop up those videos. I have been listening to, in the background, I should say, that there is a YouTube channel that's called like Sean's Study that I've just been like listening to everything. I have no idea who this person is, but they post a YouTube video daily and like they just travel all around the world. So it makes you feel like you're working in these different types of places, whether it's in Japan or China or England or anywhere else. It was just like, this is kind of like this interesting
That's cool.
kind of vibe. But the thing that I found now that I've been doing, it's really been helping me to stay on track with all of these things, which is so simple and dumb, but it is so effective, is that I keep buying whiteboards and making to-do lists with them. So there's a new whiteboard over there. There's one down below over here. And they work so well for me. I don't know why. It's so simple, but that's not my thing.
You're like, I'm not going to do this. It's like, I can do this. I'm an adult. I can figure this out. But really, you need something. We all need something. We have so much going on, especially in some of these longer projects. You feel like it's something that's going to take forever. Like, I get super overwhelmed by the forever projects. Like, I feel like I'm never going to finish.
Yeah,
So,
especially
Pomodoro.
the fun ones that also get like delayed because something happens.
Yes,
And all of a sudden you're
yes.
like, oh, that's 4 more weeks. Oh, that's 6 more weeks. And you're like, how am I going to wrangle the... Yeah, it's always a good time. But
Yep.
let's talk more about your story, Holly, because I know that you are a transition teacher. You're a success story who now works at Amazon, which is super cool, and also professor and all these other different things. But I actually don't know as much about like your teacher journey. Like I have no idea what classes you've taught or what grade. Like I have no idea about that background story. Enlighten us. What exactly was your teaching journey?
So when I went to college, I was going to be a biology major and I was going to teach science. That was my initial, what I was going to do. And the guy I was dating at the time, I was in chemistry, and you have to take organic chemistry, which is super difficult. I went to UMBC, which is outside of Baltimore, and he's like, "You might want to consider changing your major." So, because we were having a conversation about chemistry, it just wasn't clicking for me. The chemistry, the science, I did really well on all the biology courses. So I shifted my major from biology to American studies, so like social studies. And I always knew that I wanted to be a teacher since 8th grade. Like I shadowed one of my mom's friends in her middle school classroom when I was in 8th grade. They had like a job shadowing day. And then I was like, this is something I really want to do. People labeled me as a slow learner, quote unquote slow learner. They wanted to put me in special classes, and it wasn't really any of that at all. It was kind of like maybe a learning disability or neurodivergence, like things that we talk about nowadays that weren't really prevalent then. So I decided I was going to be a teacher and I was going to help other students like me. So I went into social studies or American studies, got my degree, got my certification in Maryland, and then I landed a job outside of nobody's gonna know where this is, outside of DC. It's called Southern Maryland, and at a high school. It's about 40 miles south of DC, and I taught high school government.
I would have never guessed that.
Yep. So I know government. I taught that for 4 years, and eventually, so it was incoming freshmen because the state of Maryland has a state test that they have to pass to graduate. And then eventually I got some of the, the classes where people had failed the test. So I taught some of those. They're like, you're so good with these types, quote unquote, again, these types of students who are struggling. And eventually I helped like seniors, get their selves on track that hadn't passed yet. But yeah, I taught government for 4 years. It was called LSN, Local, State, National Government.
I would have never guessed that, ever. Do you like politics? I mean,
I don't.
We've never talked about this. I'm like, do you even like?
I am
Nope.
not.
Okay.
That's not a conversation at the dinner table. That's not something like I really get into. I would always tell the students, I would say, so this was right around the time, it was like 2007. So it was post like the Gore Bush thing, definitely not what we're experiencing now. I would tell them this is how the government was set up by the founders to be run. What we're talking about, this is how it's supposed to work. And then they could get the kind of the contrast when they're listening to the news and a president signing an executive order. And they're like, wait a minute, what about checks and balances? Like, doesn't that have to go through Congress? So we would kind of get those. So it was really fun to kind of relate those different things that were happening. But yeah, I know it's so weird. The first year, I was literally learning right along with the students.
I believe it. I mean, yeah, I totally believe it. Well, fun fact, I wanted to be a paleontologist, and then I wanted to be a police officer.
Yeah.
Those were the two. I know very different fields of it. Now somehow I'm an academic, and I'm like, I don't know. It's a weird world that we live in for these different types of journeys. So you started off with this, and now all of a sudden here you are. You're teaching everything about the government, which I still can't get over. But then from there, you are taking your teaching skills and abilities, and obviously you have moved over and shifted over into instructional design. And I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong here, this was before like the transitioning teacher movement. You've been doing this way before all these things happened. So what was it like back then, trying to transition as a teacher into ID?
It's difficult because people don't really understand like the transferable skills that teachers have. And I think that thinking about like what I wanted to do next, I was going to be a teacher forever, and then like I kind of found teaching to be super regulated, and that doesn't let me tap into my creativity. So that's where I transitioned out. Yes, I was doing it before all the cool kids who are doing it now. And I actually landed a role, government contracting, as an e-learning developer with TRICARE, which is the military healthcare system. So I did that for about 7 months post teaching. It was difficult to find something that people don't know what instructional designers are, e-learning developers, instructional technologists. I got my master's in instructional technology in I got about 2 years. I was almost done by the time I was transitioning out of teaching. So I landed that role, and the supervisor I had at the time took me. He used to take us for one-on-one walks. This was in Northern Virginia because I lived in Southern Maryland, and one of the things he said to me, and I'll never forget it. He's like, "Talent recognizes talent." I'm like 20 something years old. I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, "Holly, think about it. Talent recognizes talent." He said, "There's this job at Northern Virginia Community College. You need to go apply for it." I went and applied for it. I interviewed. 15 minutes later, my manager called me and said, "We want to hire you." So that's how, like, I did a brief stint in contracting, and then I went right into higher education. And at that time, it wasn't really instructional designers, it was instructional support specialists. So supporting all the ed tech. When I was in teaching, I was the ed tech person. Like, I did a grant with the state of Maryland. I had clickers and smart boards in my classroom. Clickers that don't even exist anymore. CPS. I don't know if you remember those.
I do, yes.
So I was training people on how to do that at my school and at the Board of Education. And then, like, everything I was like, I love this stuff. I want to do more training. I want to do more, like, where I'm supporting others in their own classrooms, kind of be on the back end of that instead of dealing with all this nonsense with some of the students and some of the regulations. So it was definitely challenging to transition. There's not a lot.
No, and that's something that I don't think people are aware of, is how few instructional design jobs that there were just years ago. And by years ago, you can take literally any time frame before the pandemic. But
Yep.
I mean, I've been doing this for about a decade, and same thing, trying to be able to apply around was just like, it wasn't a thing. So you either
Right.
found that
It's like a dime a dozen, you know?
yeah, it just, they didn't exist. And the ones that did exist, you weren't too sure about what exactly you were getting into, because it kind of was
Yeah.
like unclear around some things. What did you say to make someone want to be able to offer you a job in 15 minutes? That's what I want to know. What magical thing did you say?
I don't remember exactly what I said, but I know that one of the things I did talk about, and let's put this in the perspective. This is 2011, 2012-ish.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So people are like, this is really pre-pandemic, like before we even knew COVID was coming. I talked about the trainings that I did at the Board of Education and what I learned from the instructional technologist that I had worked with at the Board of Education, and what she taught me on how to train people. So I definitely talked about that. And I think one of the things I did is I went through about 5 minutes of that training, and they were just, that's when my presentation skills and my, we love to talk, me and you, Luke, and help other people came to life. And I think that's what landed me the role, is how I dealt with other people and how I was able to take very difficult concepts when it came to ed tech and simplify it down to its like very, basic concepts.
That makes sense. That definitely makes a lot more sense. If you have that type of a demonstration, I'm sure. I mean, that's how I landed my first instructional design job. Speaking of whiteboards, was that in like one of the interviews that I went up to the whiteboard and they asked me a certain type of a concept, and I was just like, "Well, let me teach it to you." And I started like mapping and doing all like that crazy
Yeah.
stuff. And they're looking at me and they're like, all right, maybe this is the guy." And I was just like, "Please let me
Right.
be the guy." So
Yeah.
it all worked out in the end. Did you face any? So you're fast forwarding here. You're inside of this new type of role. What challenges did you face from trying to be able to like learn how to do this job, which sounds like, on the fly with what you've learned about previously, and now you're actually doing this? What challenges did you face?
Yeah, as a teacher, you come out with, and I say this about all the teachers, even mostly nowadays, is the trauma and not being with your students. There's like a certain set of like, it's like something died. I don't know, because I used to coach field hockey too. Like having to deal with those emotions of not being in front of the classroom and not being like in that routine. So dealing with in the trauma that you experience in the classroom as well, like all the regulations and they're coming in to watch your class and you have to have learning objectives. So those kinds of things, like teachers' schedules are very strict. You don't feel like you get a lot of time everybody's like, you get time off in the summers, like hardly, or those breaks, hardly. It's like you're grading stuff every time that you're off. So having to transition out of that and then into like more the backstage role where I'm not the one who's at the center of it, I'm more of the supporting actress or actor in the situation, and then having to learn technologies that I've never ever used in the classroom before. Obviously, I felt very experienced with the ones I had been training on, and then having to learn other types of systems. Like, I didn't realize the types of technologies that existed. Like, then it was like the drop throws with the smart boards and touching the screens, and it wasn't just Smart Notebook. It was like Smart had clickers as well, and they had 3 different types of clickers. They had like math clickers, and having to learn all those different things was really like, I was overwhelmed at first. I was truly overwhelmed, and then having to balance that with also developing relationships with faculty and not realizing that not every faculty member is open to this type of support.
You don't say. Wow, that's so shocking.
I'm young and naive. I'm in my 20s, mid-20s. And I'm like, if somebody was mean to me, not mean, but not like open, I was like, what is wrong with you? I don't understand. Don't you want to do this for your students? Because I'm coming out of K through 12. I'm like, everything's about the students. And higher ed wasn't like that yet. It wasn't necessarily, it was more sage on the stage kind of situation. And people were kind of turned off to the fact that, like, look, why do we need technology in the classroom? Why can't they just listen to us and take notes? And I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be so difficult.
I mean, the thing that still kills me, Holly, is that like that still is alive and well in some places.
I know.
That really is like we've gotten so much better. We've come so far as a society, but still I'll get an email every now and again asking if I can come do a talk or something for talking for faculty about like what makes a learning experience interesting and like making people want to be able to listen. And I'm like, well, tell me, what are you folks doing right now? And they're like, well, they just basically go in front of a classroom and just talk at them for 3 hours. And it's like, oh,
I know. Even online, online synchronous people do that. It's really it kills me on the inside when I hear that. I'm like, so what are your students doing? What are they experiencing? I'm like, you said you're going to Disney World. I think of that. That's an experience. What are they experiencing? They're like, they can't answer. They don't know. They're not experiencing anything. They're listening to me talk for 3 hours and they're bored.
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, I don't understand why no one's filling out the course evaluations. Well, I could tell you why. They don't want to say all these bad things about you, so they just choose to be silent. So,
right. Not to bash higher ed, but like education in general, and I say this on many of the presentations I do, education lags behind in what's happening in the modern era. They significantly lag behind accepting what's going on and what people should be doing at this point. I don't understand. It's just a very traditionalist form of, like this is how it was done back when Harvard or, people were lecturing back in those days, and this is how it's going to be done always. We're not going to mess with tradition.
No, and what's so interesting too is that when you do get, because this also happened to me recently, where you do have someone who is such a fabulous speaker and you can actually listen to them talk for hours because you're like, you are the most interesting person I have ever heard, and the way that you teach and the way you connect with the audience, like there's a way to do it that actually does make people want to essentially binge watch TED Talk videos, but they're like, hey, this is amazing. Like, so it can be done, but that's so hard to be able to have that come across from an audience. And it's just, as you said too, education is definitely lacking behind in a number of other different things. I mean, in some areas, they're thriving. And it's always so funny listening and talking with some people where they think that all the places that are doing the amazing innovations, and to be fair, there are some places like, of course, MIT and Harvard that are crushing it and doing some awesome things. But also, I have seen so much innovation from local community colleges who don't have as many hoops to be able to go through because they have a smaller type of a system.
Right.
So therefore, they can do more. And they can actually act upon things. Where I'm talking to some friends at some community colleges, and I'm like, you're doing the what? It's like, what system did you create? What simulation did you make? And they're like, yeah, this is what we're doing. And I'm like, oh my God, like that is amazing. So it's so wild to hear about what instructional design is like, depending upon what organization you go to, not just what sector, but like no matter where you go to, there's always these odd nuances with things, and it all can be kind of different about some things. But one thing that I was always interested about, and still talking about this with other people, is really just like so interesting to be able to think about, is like this concept of higher education versus corporate America.
Yeah.
There are other sectors, obviously, government, nonprofit, healthcare, freelance. Like there's a number of other different things, but it's always what it comes down to. People are like, higher ed, corporate America, what is better? You have experience with both. You have higher ed. Obviously, now you're at Amazon. We're going to talk a lot more about that, about the day in the life of what you do over at Amazon, because I am super curious. But from a, if you could paint in broad brushstrokes, is it what you thought it would be like as far as for what you heard what corporate America instructional design is like, or was it different from going into your expectations?
I think it's different. I think it's really different. And like we were talking about before this, it really depends on where you go. It's so, I want to say it's freeing in a way, getting out of academia for a bit and figuring out, because I still teach, so I've never truly left education, but getting out of academia and being in a spot like Amazon that's so innovative and you're allowed to make mistakes. Like in teaching, if you made a mistake or if your test scores weren't this or whatever, scores weren't at a certain level, it's the teacher's fault. It's the teacher's fault. It's not the learner's fault. It's not like, like when the responsibility is on them to learn. And I'm not saying that, all students, anyways, we won't get into that conversation. That's probably a slippery slope at this point.
Sure.
But for corporate, you can try so many different things. And I was so scared to like push out of my comfort zone when I first started Amazon. My manager's like, I want you to use your creativity. You podcast, you do all this on LinkedIn. You have great articles. And she's like, I want you to push yourself outside. Bring that into Amazon. And I'm like, really? Because in teaching, it's like, you're going to follow this, and this. So I felt like at a certain point, it's been really freeing to be out of that academic, that I don't want to say, it's stifling sometimes to the regulations, even in higher education, that people have to follow, or like you're saying, the hoops and the red tape that you have to jump through to get stuff done in higher education. Not at Amazon. You can try it, fail, try something else. It's not any blemish on you. It's just like it actually looks good if you tried it and failed it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's what you're looking for in an organization, that you want someone who actually
100%.
takes the chances and figures that out and everything. I mean, that was one of the things that I loved when I first came to MIT, was hearing about that, where I'm like, I want to do pilot programs. I want to do this. And they're like, great, try it. I'm like, oh, well, that's nice.
Yeah.
Sure. Let me give this a shot.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Exactly. So let's talk more about, speaking of Amazon, I'd love to just dive in further and hear more about, which is kind of funny, just like, what do you actually do? And the reason for why I phrase it like that is that instructional design jobs are just so different. But I know it's not just from the sector perspective, the organization perspective, but I can tell you that instructional designers at MIT, for the different schools, we do entirely different things. And it's wild because you're like, but you're at the same institution, so it's got to be the same. It's like, no, we're different structures, different processes, different whatever. So walk me through, like, what does a day in the life of someone who is an instructional designer inside of Amazon Pharmacy?
Yes, correct.
Okay, Amazon Pharmacy.
So we got the healthcare component working there.
Yes,
so there's some other things you have to deal with as an instructional designer in healthcare.
Right. Walk us through. What's it like?
So one of the things I had to do my first day is I had to, at Amazon, is learn about HIPAA, PHI, protected health information. I had to go through an e-learning module on HIPAA, compliance, all that stuff, like first day, right out of the gate. You had to get that done within the first day. Because that's what you have to do in the healthcare industry. So I'm like taking these e-learning modules. I'm like, what? I'm like, am I in higher ed again? I hear compliance, accreditation. We're accredited by URAC, Amazon Pharmacy. And for those people who know, yes, Amazon has a pharmacy and it's fantastic. I use it. I'm not just saying that because I work there. It's really amazing what Amazon has done in the healthcare space. But that was my first day. And I'm like, ooh, I'm not even getting training on the systems or anything. This is what's important on the first day. So daily at this point, as an instructional designer and switching from education to corporate, I had to upskill. We use 360 products to articulate. So having to become more comfortable with those sorts of products instead of the education facing ones was definitely a challenge for me. At this point, in 2 years in, I'm more comfortable. But in the day in life of a designer, you are really project managing every single day. You are looking at your projects. You're trying to, what we say, refer to as Amazon, move the needle. And I'm sure other people say that too, on your projects, making sure that something's moving because you want to keep pushing forward. It's always day one at Amazon. You can look up leadership principles and about, that sort of situation where it's always day one. We're always trying to be innovative. So moving the needle on my projects, upskilling myself on a daily basis, working with my colleague because we all are at different spots. Like I will say this for transitioning teachers who are listening, 3 out of the 5 instructional designers on our team are former educators.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So that is something to be said. They were looking, I said, when I did my interview, I was like, I'm a teacher at heart. Education is my jam. And they're like, we're looking for somebody with that to bring that into the corporate space. So don't be upset if you're like, you're applying these corporate roles and you think it's because it's your education. It's probably not. They really want to bring in that education stuff. Anyways, so really like just dealing with my projects. I find that time management has been a huge thing. Because of the freedom to work from home and manage those projects. We do 2-week sprints. We use Scrum, Agile. So figuring out my calendar, and really trying to just get stuff done on time and dealing with the SMEs. And we have some really good ones. We're really fortunate. We have some really great SMEs. And the documentation, as a team, we were separated into 2 different departments at first because there's like if you think about a pharmacy, there's like a front end and then there's the back end, the people who are like fulfilling the medications and stuff. But our team came together it's almost been 2 years. So we had to figure out how to, all the processes that we were going to use from start to finish with like figuring out like, we're going to do intake calls. We're going to do task analysis, like kind of follow the ADDIE model, but how that all looks and what we're filling out and what we're documenting. So daily, it's just those administrative tasks, moving the needle, project management, making sure things are getting done that need to get done. But on the other side of that, the innovation piece, like how are we going to level ourselves up, but what are we doing to level up pharmacy and the customers that we serve? Our customers for instructional design are the people who are being hired. So the customer care agents, the pharmacists, the certified technicians. And learning about pharmacy, oh my God, there are so many acronyms. So many acronyms.
Oh, do you find it funny about how it's just like, as you said earlier, that like chemistry was haunting you and now here you are years later?
I know, I'm working for a pharmaceutical company and I'm like, fortunately I don't have to know like what the shapes of them are or balance any of the equations. I know how to do safety and stuff, and that's about as far as I go.
Yeah, that's funny.
About as far as I go.
What I found really interesting too, as you were talking about that, is also who your target audience is. Because I don't think a lot of folks recognize that especially for that type of a corporate instructional design role, is that for a lot of people, they're like, oh, you're doing something like for the customer. And you're like, no, we're doing something like internal for the employees and therefore what
group.
They're going to do for interacting with people and so on and so forth. And it's really important to be able to help them out at the right level and positioning because it's going to have that trickle down effect and literally touch like every aspect of a customer experience eventually. As they go through your trainings. So
it's like higher ed when you're helping the faculty, not directly the students necessarily. It's the same situation.
Right.
We're not the faculty are the SMEs and the trainers, and the students are the people who are being hired. Dealing with the customers, the agents, and stuff like that. So, yep.
That makes sense. Can you walk us through like a specific project that you've either are working on or have worked on that you're proud of? I'd love to hear an example.
I am So as much as I can share, I'm super proud of the fact that Amazon likes to, and I'm sure this exists in higher education as well, we like to use a lot of our own and build our own internal systems. So there's a lot of systems that we use in pharmacy that have built internally by our great developers. And we've shifted some things recently. And one of the things that I've learned how to do is simulations instead of articulate. So the trainer will record a click path in a certain system, and then they'll send it to us, and then I will put it together as this like interactive experience. They're literally, the agent is going through the system as they would if they were taking a call or if they were dealing with a certain issue. So it's like you're in, put the goggles on. There's no goggles involved yet, quite yet. But, put the goggles on and you're literally in the experience of it. And so the time to proficiency for people to feel like they have a good handle on their role has decreased significantly for us. And the business loves that because it saves them money and time and all those wonderful things. So I've been really proud to do these simulations, and one of my coworkers taught me how to do it. What was the first one I did? The first one I did was probably back in January, and I think the first one took me a good, I don't know, a whole week, probably 40 hours plus. And at this point, I'm doing them in 12 hours or less, depending upon the length. So I've really learned how to do it and do it well. And the other thing is that the feedback that we get on these, like we've added in little characters because somebody on our team is really good at that. And the agents that are coming on board, and the pharmacists and the certified techs, they just feel confident. And that, to me, as an educator, is so important, that these people are feeling confident in their skills. And obviously it's important for pharmacy for safety reasons. So that is what I'm most proud of, is developing those simulations, working with the SMEs, making sure the process is, crystal clear. You sit there and you look at the system and every single little click. Like, you're not just going through and skipping stuff. Like, it's every single little click. And thinking about what would benefit the learner. That has been super rewarding and made me love the job. Made me love the job. Not just designing like those e-learning experiences where you're like, starting from scratch, like those are challenging enough, but these simulations, these are top notch. And these are things like, if a system changes, we can just say, hey, we're just going to break it down task by task, very minimal, and that's how you're going to learn it. It's going to be something that's digestible, and it's going to be easier for you to do once you're finished. And it's funny though, I have to say this is probably the bad thing about simulations. So roughly a 10 to 15 minute simulation that's going to take somebody 10 to 15 minutes is hours of work for an instructional designer. People don't realize the ratio, depending upon, the nice to haves or just the basic level, but it's hours of work, but it's so rewarding. I love it.
I always think about whenever I have to go through a training at HR and they make me use like Rise or something like that. And I'm like, I know how you did this. Like, I've done this before.
Yeah.
Like,
all the secrets.
Yeah, I was like, see, you went here to go to there to go to there. Simulations are great. Certainly, they can be awesome. Simulations can also be really like cheesy and wonky. There doesn't seem to be either like this type of a middle ground, that either you have something that's a simulation that really is captivating and it does like the true essence of what you're hoping for, or it's just looking like some weird thing that comes out of the 90s and you're like, oh yeah, I'm not gonna.
Oh, I know.
No, I'm not gonna learn.
We try to, sometimes we try to have fun, and we try to I think there's some sort of e-learning somewhere in our curriculum that was Mario Brothers. Because I said the other day I wanted to create something that's Mario Brothers, where he's actually jumping in and out of the pipes and doing all the sounds and all that stuff. And there's some sort of simulation I haven't found yet that somebody created a while ago that probably needs updating. I was like, we try to do those fun types of things. I think one of my coworkers did something like very Lord of the Rings ish, with like a journey and a map, or maybe it's more like Zelda. It was probably more like Zelda, I think,
sure,
at this point. But we try to incorporate that stuff because millennials are dominating the workforce, so they'll probably be able to relate to it in some way. So that's also fun too, is bringing in those real world aspects and things that are part of like our culture.
I love seeing the simulations that have the first person view, where you are actually like locked and loaded and you have to look at the character or whatever it is, like something that
Yep.
makes you go and like confront the scenario where it is in front of you and you have to act upon it and there's no like kind of getting around it,
Yes.
which I know can like sound extreme, but I've seen it when it's done really well. I've seen a simulation before that came from MIT's Media Lab that was like essentially a type of a training via with an email where you're receiving emails from this person that are unwanted and you have to like choose how to respond back, and depending upon what you say, it creates that type of like branching path for like a scenario based simulation where it keeps on giving you
Yep.
different emails, and every time you send one out, another person writes into you who comments on like the last person's email, and it's like it was the real world where it was like
Yeah,
I mean, now we don't use
exactly.
email anymore. That was a couple years ago. Now it's like envisioning like what a Slack message could look like. And it's that type of thing. But same thing too. My wife works at Etsy, and she showed me what they went through for one of their types of training simulations, where you're inside of like conference room, and one person says something that clearly rubs everyone the wrong way, and like you're like looking around of like, how do I navigate this conversation?
Right.
And even though it definitely was just like, this is kind of like uncomfortable, but at the same time, you're like, but this is real. Like if someone actually said that in a
It
conference room,
happens.
and you're like,
It legit happens.
no, like no, we don't. Yeah. So it's
Right.
just fascinating to think about that for what you can do with a simulation versus
Yep.
seeing some things where you're like,
You're making
No.
a really good point here, Luke, because I'm saying it for the hard skills, like learning the systems, but also for the soft skills too.
yeah,
Like it's important for that, and those branching techniques, like the Black Mirror episodes where you kind of chose your own adventure. Not we're not going that dark, but we're not going that way. But just
trap me in
related
a
to
room
something.
on a cardio bike, please. Yeah, but like really
Yeah.
not like that.
No, we're not doing that. But like that stuff, it makes it so realistic. And I know that you've talked about recently, like how can higher ed relate to the real world with instructional design, and that's one of the ways. That's one of the ways.
That would be, well, that's actually a great idea. That's a really good idea to make someone experience about what's an email actually like from a person. And of course, 99% of the time, people are very kind and wonderful and everything. But sometimes you get that one person where you're like, whew.
Like, how do you
really,
deal with
really,
this as a new professional? Like, it's very
Yeah.
daunting. Like, at this point, me and I'm middle aged. You're getting there.
Yeah.
We let this stuff roll off our backs. We're like, no.
No.
We're just
I
not
mean, at
putting
this
up
point in
with it.
time, it's almost surprising if you have someone like big time you, where you're like, wait a minute, like I've been here for years. I've been doing this thing for like a decade, and I was just like, what? What?
Yeah.
It still happens. Like it still
does
happens.
still happen.
There are those people, but it is interesting. Well, you also mentioned too, and I definitely want to touch upon this, is with collaboration. Sounds like you have an awesome internal team for
do.
everything. And certainly what people don't talk about enough from instructional design are the people skills. And I never work by myself. Ever. Everything is a Zoom call, it's a Slack, it's an email, it's text, it's something. I'm always working with other people. What is your collaboration process like? Internal team members, SMEs, like, are you in the same thing where you're constantly just like working with other people on these projects?
Oh yeah, constantly. It's very difficult. Once we get into development, we can be a little bit siloed. But even then, we put stuff in review for our team to see first before we send it out to the SMEs, so we can kind of, if we catch some small things before we send it out to the SMEs for review. And collaboration on our team is like, I need help with this, Slack huddle, and we are all just open to helping each other because of the different levels of skills that we have. Like, one person on my team, they don't feel comfortable writing measurable learning objectives. I'm like, I got you. I was a teacher. I worked in higher ed forever. And then his skills, like designing some of these characters or these motion paths or things, I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I need, that's how it looks on our team. We're very open. We're very transparent with each other. Like, we don't take things personally at all. The constructive criticism is really an opportunity for us for growth. So our team is very close, in the fact that we all understand that we're not there downing each other. We're building each other up just to be better instructional designers, and that's really important on teams, is that you can trust the people that you work with. And I 100% trust all the people that I work with. I would send them anything, even if it was crap. They would tell me, this is crap, you need to fix it, and it's not gonna hurt my feelings. I'm like, because at this point, Like, I know that I cut some corners here or things like that. For the broader team, working with the SMEs and some of the trainers and stuff, I try to get to, like, my methods or my tactics for getting to know people are leading with empathy, and like understanding they're so busy. They're SMEs in these areas, but we can't be like bugging them all the time. Like, if we have a question, we really have to value their time. I try to get to know them personally too. Like, since we're not in person and we're not sitting in an office every day, so we talk about different things. Like, I recently found out that one of my colleagues, she makes like these cute little like makeup travel bags, and she's like, "What do you want? You want me to make you one? What do you want me to make you?" I'm like, Baltimore Orioles, because I love baseball. And so she made me a bag recently. I had no idea that she did that stuff until I started like having a conversation with her about like what she does outside of work. And one of my other friends likes golf, which I engage in as well. So like developing that sense of like, we're here to do something professionally, but also we have lives outside of it. I think that really adds to the earning trust piece of working with a SME and then delivering on the project and giving them, examples of things that we can do for them, from like very basic to very advanced, and kind of giving them like, well, what do you want? What do you want to pick from? Do you think this is going to work for you? Should it be a job aid, or should it be a full-blown e-learning experience, or a simulation, or branching scenarios, and this is how much time it's going to take. Again, the transparency about like people when they would send in tickets, and I'm sure you got this too. Here's a presentation in Google Slides. Make this an interactive e-learning. Okay.
Yeah.
Make this move. And I'm like, that's not what we do here. It's about behavioral changes. I'm like, we have to think about like, what are you trying to get the learner to do? There may be some informational pieces, but at the end of this, what behavioral change do you want to see in the learner? And they're like, I didn't think about it like that. I'm like, yeah, that's why we have instructional designers, because we think about it like that. Simply watching something move on the screen or clicking something isn't necessarily a learning something. It doesn't mean you did it. Yeah, go ahead.
Have you seen that Toy Story meme that says how I get through my training, and it's Ham, and he's using the remote?
Oh, he's hitting he's hitting it like a million times fast.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like,
yes, I've seen that.
That's the real world. Is just like, how fast can I smash the next button when something is done very poorly, and you're like, just get me out of here, please. And having someone who just says, make it pretty and interactive, and you're like,
we can do that. We can do that for you, but I feel like that should be a job aid. That shouldn't be a e-learning experience.
No.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned about like learning new things about your team members. One of the things that my team started to do at my director's request for us is to do something that are called mois. No idea if you've ever heard of this before, but
that's
essentially
French for me.
So yes, you got that exactly. Me. So it's essentially a presentation about you. And
oh God, that's so uncomfortable.
Have 30. So it's so funny to see like what happens, because of course we have a big team, and all the extroverts right away were like, I'll go first. So like all the extroverts like myself go and I presented, like I won like day one. And of course you get to do like essentially like a slideshow about like your life, and like, all these different things. But the purpose of it was that we kept on hiring so many people, and we're pretty much like, we are in person, but like primarily we're remote for things. So a lot of these people kept on coming onto the team, and we don't know anything about them besides like what you do for your job. So you mentioned about how your colleague was able to make you that Baltimore Oriole thing. And like, so there's so many things that people have like these amazing hobbies and passions and you don't know about, and especially for some of the folks who maybe do not talk as much and they get to do a presentation about themselves. And we had an engineer last week go up and talk more about his life, and come to find out this person who I've talked to, of course, here and there about different types of problems with like tickets for different types of things for courses and other different like bugs and whatnot. Come to find out, he's a champion cyclist, wakeboarder, jiu-jitsu, like all this stuff. And you're like,
isn't that hilarious when you find this stuff out?
Right? It's like, you do what? It's just like, it's what I do. And I'm like, how has this never come about in any conversation? So anyway, that's why I love these mois. Like, I know, as you said, that some people are like, this is super uncomfortable, but it gives a platform to actually share more about you, and then you find interest with your colleagues, and you're like, we have this thing in common. I had no idea. So it's like, it builds that culture in a different way.
Yeah,
It's
that
cool.
relation. I call it relational capacity because I took a training as a teacher one time.
Oh, I like it.
And like people, you don't understand how much you have in common with other humans. It takes very little conversation to figure it out. I met very little people where I haven't had at least one thing in common with them. Some sort of trauma experience. Like I'm an extroverted introvert, not quite extroverted as you, but like I won't get too much in this, but like my trauma is a big part of my life. Like I've had a lot of death, a lot of situations that I've been through personally that impact me on a daily basis. And so that, having that conversation with people and just letting them know what's like a couple weeks ago, had a really bad grief week. It was just one of those weeks. So I told one of my coworkers and my boss, I'm like, it's not a good week for me. I'm doing what I can and, being they've been very understanding about, take the time that you need, that sort of situation. I really like that for our workforce nowadays. But you just don't know what people are going through, whether positive or negative. Like people are getting married, they're having kids, they're getting dogs, whatever they're doing. They're going to Taylor Swift in Sweden. I actually found out my one coworker is going to Iceland in August.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's too cool.
So I love having those conversations with people. You don't have to get like too personal. You just, like we're not robots. We're humans.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the way for you to be able to do more from trying to actually build out those relationships and your network and everything else. I mean, like it's so, once again, things that you wish that you learned about in school that like kind of whatever. And
Those
it's funny
soft
because now,
skills.
of course, that I say that out loud, I did have a teacher try to be able to tell us how to make friends. We were changing schools. Where 8th grade, it's done. We're going into a new high school. And 6th grade science teacher was trying to explain to us about how we can make new friends with people. And she was trying to show us about how to properly shake hands and like how to compliment people and all these other things that, of course, were dumb 6th graders were like, yeah, whatever.
Nah.
Yeah, now as a 36-year-old, I'm like, wow, you were so right. Like,
Yeah.
yep.
So on
But
point,
it's just
for
the
sure.
act of just being able to compliment someone, and then therefore that starts a conversation, and then that leads into the next thing, and then all of a sudden now you're like, close friends with this person years down the road, and like that's all it really takes to really get that going. And like, I mean, like,
That's
Holly, I mean, heck, even you and I
know.
I shot you a LinkedIn message being like, hey, you talk about great stuff. You want to talk sometime?
Yeah, we're
I
like,
think that was it.
how many years are we going on now? 4? 3 or 4?
At least 4. It was
At
it
least
was
4. And we met
4.
once in person.
We met in person. Yeah.
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 When I
Yep.
say on LinkedIn that some of my very, very best friends I've met on LinkedIn, I'm referring to you.
Heck yeah. Like, you are one of the only people I have met in person. From online to in person, you are one of like the 4 people I've met. So, yeah.
It's awesome. You don't realize like people are so turned off by the digital space sometimes but you can develop very deep connections with people in a digital form. Like I have a very good friend that works at Amazon. She lives in Phoenix. I've seen her once in person and we talk every day. We say what's frustrating on us. We talk about golf. We talk about all kinds of stuff. So it's just so eye-opening. And I think that one of the things corporate does well is it lets people have that space. We'll do like not necessarily happy hours, but we'll do like after work. I told my team, I was like, we haven't talked in a while. I'm like, we haven't talked outside of work in a bit. So I arranged like this. Let's have a conversation. Let's see what everybody's up to. One of my managers from Puerto Rico, my manager and another one live in Texas. One lives in Seattle. One lives in Manchester, New Hampshire. Another one lives in Idaho. I'm like, let's catch up with each other. What are you doing? Because we've been so heads down into the project. So we had a little get together, and it's amazing the thing I was going to say is once you develop those relationships with people, how much easier it is to do the projects together because you feel comfortable with each other and you trust each other, and there's not kind of like this awkward like intake call, you're meeting them for the first time situation. Like you already know them and you already know what they're about and what they do. And I have them explain their jobs because I still don't have any idea what the hell some of these people do. And I don't know how they do it. And, asking about what this acronym means because I still don't know all of them. But the project goes a lot more it goes much more smoothly.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
How was your, speaking of acronyms for things, because especially in instructional design land, we have UBD and UDL and SAM and all these other different ones.
Yeah.
How was trying to be able to adopt that? Because you mentioned about Agile and Scrum, and there's plenty of organizations that say that they're agile and that they're nimble, and then like you find out like they're really not. But
Yeah.
Amazon, if there was one place that I would pray that actually is agile and nimble and flexible, it would be Amazon. So like, how is it adapting to that? Because in education, it's slow, it's methodical, and then like now here you are into that type of world. What was that like to?
Oh my gosh, it's completely overwhelming. You don't know which way to look, honestly. Like some of these ideas, like Amazon does a lot of internal awards at our big events for people who are being like. When I got the job at Amazon, they're like, this is a big deal, right? Like the recruiter said that, like, it's a big deal to get a job at Amazon because of the expectations that you have to meet. And there's two interviews. That's it. You do a phone screen and then you do a group interview. And then usually if you're at that group interview, you're one of the two final candidates, and that's it. And they say it's a huge deal. And I'm like, I felt all kinds of pressure. I'm like, I don't know why I'm here. But then like just talking to people and speaking to educational experiences, definitely it is 100% overwhelming. But once you start to get a feel for what the culture is like at the organization and how they operate, and using all the different terms, I drank the Amazon Kool-Aid, let's be honest. Like, you're gonna drink it. It's Amazon. Like Jeff Bezos literally started this in a garage selling books. Like started use book. I remember college, don't you? Like saying like, did you go on Amazon to see if you could rent that or get that for a cheaper price? Maybe because I'm just a little bit older than you. But it's just crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And I love the fact that some of the things that have stuck, some of the people are still there that have started it, and they talk about their experiences coming into Amazon as well. And I think that's like that with every corporation, like the people that stay for long periods of time and they start these different initiatives. Like this month we have GAM, which is Global Accessibility Awareness Month, and we have a big conference that Amazon does with a whole bunch of from all across Amazon, across the world. Like you don't realize how big Amazon is until you get into it. And it's just so many different big events, and there's DevCon, there's like all these different things that are happening. It's very overwhelming, but you find where you want to go and like where you want to put your extra time in terms of like upskilling or professional development. But yeah, it's super overwhelming, but it's also like you remember the reason you got into instructional design. You remember the reason like why you do these things that have to do with learning and education. It's huge reminders of that we should be always pushing forward, and we should always be making people better every day. So.
Couldn't have said it better myself. I love it. I love it. What are you paying attention to right now for different types of trends? I mean, obviously, I'm paying attention constantly to AI, as I've talked about on this show a million times. But like, what are you paying attention to right now that could potentially impact the lives of Amazonians? Is that what you?
Yeah,
call yourselves? Yeah, okay.
Amazonians.
Pulled that out of nowhere. All right. Yeah. What are you paying attention to?
Good job. Obviously, yeah, AI is, we have our own internal AI system that was built. We're not allowed to use ChatGPT.
Oh.
Because it's a third-party thing, so we have an internal one. So I'm definitely paying attention to that. And I think the different devices that are coming out, like you mentioned the Apple Vision Pro, like how is that going to impact our training? If people are at home with these devices and we can literally do a video inside a pharmacy fulfillment center and have these interactive experience where they're actually grabbing stuff instead of just clicking on the screen, where they're actually grabbing the experience. So I'm paying attention to those things, along with and I know this has been a buzzword in education for a while, the adaptive learning piece, how we're customizing it. I'm still very much paying attention to that because I don't think we're doing that enough in corporate at this point. We're kind of just like, okay, here's the system. This is what you need to know. Go do your job. But how are we customizing it to maybe 6 months down the road, they might need to be retrained, or if they're leveling up, what's the next step for them? Or if they're ready to, like they come in with some experience, maybe they can level up, maybe do some more advanced tasks. They could be a different spot. So I'm really paying attention to like how all that's going to interact with each other. Like, where's the common ground? Where are the challenges going to be? Are we providing the technologies? No, or we just, because you can't assume everybody has those devices at home. I really want to see where AI, the hard, like the physical technologies, and the personalized, how they all kind of mesh together and work together.
Yeah. Now, please correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't it Amazon who also created some type of a cardboard,
Yep.
like an old school? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Because I know that for one class that we had, there was a VR component, and we're
Yep.
thinking about for different forms of costs. That was one of the ones we recommended, is that if you were not going to go down the traditional type of Oculus path and you wanted a less expensive version, Amazon had these other ones.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it's like Amazon. I think it was called like Amazon Cardboard or something like that. I
Yeah.
really think it was very simple. I don't even. Yeah, but yeah, that was definitely that's definitely still that's an option. That's a thing, and it was very affordable.
Yeah. Have you seen speaking of Disney and whatnot, have you seen that latest technology that's like that type of movable treadmill underneath your feet that like glows as you're walking, so that way in a VR space it actually feels like you are legitimately walking towards something?
Oh my gosh!
Have you seen that? That just came out like 2 days ago, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh man, here we go. Like, we're getting
Yeah.
there. And of course, the biggest thing is, as you mentioned about, is like, who can afford these things? Because it's all so cool as far
That
as for
Vision
like,
Pro is expensive.
oh, I'm never gonna buy one. No,
Yeah,
you
it's
can't.
so expensive.
Absolutely not. Not until that thing comes down to a price that is. I mean, I just got a PS5 recently because I refused to buy one at top. I was like, I am not spending
Exactly.
like $700 when it came out, something like that. I was like, absolutely not. You would no. I will play my old school PS4 that still barely runs, but it's running, and I will be like that with technology, where it's just like,
Yep.
you want to be the cool kid, but at the same time, whatever the Vision Pro cost
Works
is nowadays,
fine.
like.
Oh, I don't even know. I didn't even like. I heard about it and then I saw the price and I'm like, I'm not even paying attention right now.
No,
I'm paying
it was-
attention to other stuff.
It's like $2,500 when it first got announced. Something
Who can
stupid.
afford that?
Yeah, I was like, I'm still.
What normal middle class
No.
instructional designer can afford that?
Nope. No instructional designer or higher education is going to be buying that anytime soon. I am confident in telling you that. So, no, it doesn't make any sense. Well, I know that we've been talking for quite a bit. So let me ask you one other thing as well, too, is like reflecting upon your career path, your journey, all the different things that you have been going into. What's something that you can share with the listeners at home that has really helped you out with being able to get to where you are today, that perhaps they can take some steps right now to be able to follow in your footsteps?
I would say it's not just one thing. It's definitely perseverance and not getting, not getting bogged down by like the noise that's out there, and everybody's like talking about on LinkedIn world about. You and I kind of came up together in the LinkedIn world, like I don't even call myself an influencer. I don't even know where that people
I don't know
say
what
that
we
to
are.
me.
We're something.
I don't know what we're doing. We're just here. We're just like at this point in our career, we're just giving back. But it's not just one thing. But really, I think putting yourself out there and sharing what you know, because not everybody knows everything. I know you did something recently. You can say I don't know. You did a post about that.
Yeah,
and
of course.
I love that. Like,
Of course.
you aren't required to know everything, and especially if you're getting into this job market, it is very competitive. As many as instructional design roles and e-learning developers and content creators and all those different things, it's super competitive now. Trying to land a role in this industry, and the one thing you have to do is be confident in your skills and know where you want to go. Like it, no matter what, it's drowning out the noise, other people's opinions. If you know you want to work, Amazon wasn't on my radar. I'm not gonna lie, it was not on my radar, and I just happened to talk to somebody that knew somebody, and somebody I met down here when I moved to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, worked at Amazon. And she's like, "You're very articulate. You do a lot of great. I'm a web designer. I think you should come work for Amazon. I think you'd be a good fit there." Wasn't even on my radar. So I just had a conversation with like a friend. So putting yourself out there, knowing where you want to go, and not getting turned off by some of the negativity that's out there. You kind of just drowned it out. I think that's what's so important nowadays, because people are going to have opinions about what you do, what you say. If you sell something and you shouldn't be selling this, or your time or whatever, if you know that you want to be an entrepreneur and you're going to sell a course or you're going to sell some sort of coaching, something, do it. Try it, see if it works. And then if it doesn't work, try something else. I mean, that's what life's all about. We're not here for a very long amount of time. So at this point, I'm just giving back. And I think once you start doing that, it feels really, really good to do that. So figuring that out. And then at some point, Luke, like we're on the back nine for retirement. I mean, we're rounding the 8th hole, going into the 9th hole, and we got to start thinking about those things. Even if you're at the early stages of your career, start thinking about like what's your next move is going to be. And I know JD Dillon talks a lot about that. What's your next move? And thinking about in your current role, what's the next point where you wanna be. So it's a variety of different things. It's not. I wish it was a silver bullet, but it's not. It takes a lot of hard work. Do you remember when I had like 50 followers in 2020, and I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is LinkedIn world. We should be this vast community of, people. And now I'm approaching 32,000. We're around the same. Like,
you've soared way past me. Don't give me that. No, you're like you're on a rocket right now, and I'm like, hey, go you, Holly. You're killing it.
But it's just like never in my life did I imagine on any social media type platform that would happen to me. Just sharing what I know, just sharing my passion, and talking to other people.
But the thing is that I know why people follow you is like because you're human. There's a lot of people out there who, like, as you mentioned about just like how important it is to be vulnerable, admitting mistakes and everything. And I know it's hard to be able to do, but at some point in time, it's just like, I hate the whole, like, I know it all mentality where you make it up on the fly and hope for the best. And it's like, come on now. And a lot of your posts that you talk about, you always share about the behind the scenes of things and how things work and what it's actually really like. And you talk about disappointment and wins and all the emotions that come with things, which is awesome. So it makes plenty of sense to see from how much you keep on growing and growing and growing. So no, it's been awesome. It's been awesome. It makes a lot of sense.
It's been a great journey. I'm so happy. I'm so happy with the journey. And it's like, I wouldn't change anything about it from the beginning till now. Like all the people that I've gotten to meet, it's so awesome. It's so amazing.
I'm currently reading Arnold Schwarzenegger's new book, which is very random, but I've stumbled upon it, so I'm reading it right now.
Sometimes.
One of the things though he said though, you actually commented about this, and it was something that I've been doing for a while, and I didn't really figure out like how to phrase it into words, and he does a much more eloquent job than I do inside of the book. But it's essentially taking the power away from the naysayers and then using that to fuel your motivation. So as you said, that you want to be able, you want to become an entrepreneur, you try to be able to do something, people make fun of you for your product or whatever it is, and you use that as fuel to be able to say like, all right, how can I go out now and do this even better and prove those people wrong? And like, that is something that motivates me. Which is like, you have to understand like your source of motivation, especially for upskilling and for all these other different things. And that negativity, as much as it sucks to hear, like in the first 30 seconds when you hear about it, and you're like, all right, I'm going to remember that as I go and conquer this new thing and then go and prove you wrong, is like that mentality that is interesting, especially for a social media day and age where it's just, you have a million keyboard warriors who are just like firing things off and not even thinking anything else. And trying to be able to use that in a way that actually can become a positive spin on things, is something that like we all need to do more. It's really hard, but like it
took me till almost 40 years old to not be a people pleaser. I'm not gonna lie,
right?
Like, not people please and really focus on who I am. And that comes with me professionally and personally.
Right.
Like, saying no to things. No is a full sentence.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. Well, Holly, let's end it. I can talk to you all day, so I
know we could talk for days
at some point in time. So I need to be able to make sure I'm being respectful of your time and not just keep on blabbering on all night and day. You do a lot of amazing things. Where can people go to find you, learn more, hear about what you're up to? Please share away.
Absolutely. LinkedIn World is my jam. I'm out there all the time. I'm posting job postings Mondays and Fridays for US based. Wednesdays I do every other week international based. So follow me for that. Also, our podcast, and I have a co-host now, Nadia Johnson, at Up Ed Tech. We're doing some changes, but we're still gonna retain the same fun level of like talking to people, getting to hear their stories. So at upedtech.com, it's all LinkedIn world to me now. That's where it's at. That's where I make most of my connections, and that's where I love to post. So follow me out there. I have a website of like my portfolio and stuff. It's on my LinkedIn page, but nothing like official. So definitely come connect, follow, send me a message. Open to it all.
Awesome. Well, everyone will be doing that. And Holly, once again, thank you so much for coming on the show. And until the next episode next sixth one, seventh one, whatever the number is, I'm sure we'll be doing this again soon.
Yes, we will.
Awesome. Thanks so much again.
Thank you.